Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking ISO 14001-2026. If you're involved in environmental management, you already know the drill. The days of just having a nice-sounding environmental policy tucked away in some dusty binder, yeah, those are completely over. We're going to explore exactly how the latest standards force organizations to transition from symbolic, paper-based compliance to integrated, real-world environmental outcomes. It's all about creating a direct, undeniable link between what you say on paper and what's actually happening on the ground.
So, let's just dive right into it by asking the foundational question. It's the exact same question any lead auditor is going to use to challenge your organization. Is your environmental management system, your EMS, just paperwork? Historically, a lot of organizations built these frameworks heavily focused on having all the right documentation and perfectly filled out forms. But ISO 14001-2016 shifts the whole paradigm. An auditor isn't just skimming your manual anymore. They are actively looking to see if your system produces verifiable, real-world environmental results.
To show you how this works, we'll use a theory versus practice framework today to trace an auditor's exact journey. We'll quickly cover defining the EMS scope, integration into business processes, delivering measurable environmental outcomes, identifying significant environmental aspects, and finally, setting actionable environmental objectives.
All right, let's start with part 1, defining the EMS scope.
Setting your boundaries under Clause 4.3 is literally the structural foundation of everything we're talking about today. Basically, you can't manage what isn't inside those boundaries, right? But here's the catch. Auditors are now actively hunting for what's called artificial scope limitation. This is when a company intentionally shrinks its EMS coverage just to make an audit easier or to dodge highly sensitive operations. Picture a logistics company that includes its, say, administrative offices in its EMS scope, but conveniently leaves out its entire high-emission transportation fleet. Fleet fuel consumption is their primary source of greenhouse gas emissions. Excluding it completely distorts their environmental risk profile. Auditors see exclusions like this as a massive nonconformance. Your scope has to reflect your actual environmental footprint, not just the easy stuff.
Moving on to Section 2, Integration into Business Processes. Once you've honestly defined your scope, Clause 4.4 demands you build a bridge straight from the admin office into everyday operations. Your EMS simply cannot be some isolated parallel system run by just one department. Environmental accountability has to be baked into all your core business processes to stop fragmented compliance. Procurement needs to evaluate suppliers using environmental criteria. Design teams, they've got to consider the life cycle impact of new products. Logistics must optimize routes to save fuel. Think about it. If an auditor walks into a facility and the machine operators assume that only the environmental department handles tracking wastewater, well, that's a massive red flag. Responsibilities have to be embedded directly into operational roles and daily decision-making.
Which brings us to Section 3, delivering measurable environmental outcomes. Now this is the operational climax right here. Clause 4.4 isn't just about having integrated processes, it's about what those processes actually achieve in the real world. Picture a split screen here. On one side, you have an auditor reviewing a digital dashboard of measurable environmental performance data. On the other side, you see a highly efficient, real-world wastewater treatment system. The data on that screen has to perfectly validate what is physically happening on the floor, clearly demonstrating the achievement of intended environmental outcomes. It is the absolute ultimate proof that an organization's commitment to pollution prevention is actually producing real, tangible benefits. When that auditor is staring at your dashboard, they are hunting for objective evidence. They want to see a clear, downward trend, like a solid 3-month drop in chemical oxygen demand and heavy metal concentrations in that wastewater. This isn't just some vague promise to do better. No, this is hard, traceable evidence proving your operational controls are genuinely minimizing environmental harm. Frankly, if your data doesn't look something like this, your EMS is probably failing to meet the core standard.
Next up, Section 4, identifying significant environmental aspects.
So to actually drive those metrics down, Clause 6.1 requires relentless precision. You really have to know exactly what you're trying to manage before you can actually manage it. Now, you probably already know that an aspect is just your interaction with the environment, the physical ways your business touches the natural world, like discharging wastewater or burning fuel. But here's the thing. Auditors are now heavily scrutinizing whether you've captured every single hidden operational aspect, completely mapping out the root causes of your footprint.
And consequently, the impact is the change that results from that interaction. We're talking about the actual water pollution, the soil contamination, or the air degradation. The 2026 standard leaves absolutely no room for guessing here. Every single aspect must be mapped directly to its resulting impact to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you understand the consequences of your operations.
Because, let's be real, you can't tackle everything at once. This is where risk-based thinking becomes absolutely crucial. You need structured, documented criteria like the severity of an impact or the frequency of its occurrence to determine which aspects are truly significant and actually demand your immediate focus and budget. You just can't treat every single environmental interaction with the exact same level of severity. As the saying goes, if you try to prioritize everything, you prioritize nothing.
Finally, we reach Section 5, Setting Actionable Environmental Objectives. This brings us to the resolution phase under Clause 6.2. Look, identifying significant aspects is pretty useless if you don't take action. To prove measurability, your objectives have to rely on quantitative targets. For example, setting a hard 15% reduction target for volatile organic compound emissions over a 3-year period. Vague goals like reduce environmental impact or improve sustainability, those are total audit traps. They don't provide a baseline, they completely lack a timeline, and you simply can't measure them. But a 15% reduction over 3 years using low-emission coatings, that is highly specific, it's trackable, and it proves your policy commitments are actually operationalized.
Now, to ensure those numerical targets are actually hit, the EMS has to break down the objectives using this mandatory 4-step action plan framework so accountability is crystal clear. You have to document exactly what actions will be taken, who precisely is responsible for them, how the resources and methods are going to be deployed, and when the timeline mandates completion. If you have an objective without this exact framework attached to it, well, it's really just a wish. As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to take a quick moment to reflect on your own organization's practices. Ask yourself this one final, provocative question. Are you simply filling out documentation just to pass an audit, or have you successfully bridged that gap between policy and practice? Because the true measure of ISO 14001:2026 isn't the thickness of your environmental manual anymore. It's the verifiable, real-world reduction of your environmental footprint. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I really hope this deep dive helps you transform your environmental compliance from just paper into measurable reality.